which kind of makes sense now that you said. I've never heard that negative before. Again, I don't know. This is all new to me. Catchers didn't do this when I was playing, but it's really interesting stuff. What's going on, guys? Coach Matt and YouGoProBaseball.com. I'm here with my man Kyle Schmidt again for another catching video. Current pro catcher in the Twins organization. We did a few videos already. In this video, we're talking about the new receiving technique that you're seeing these catchers starting from the bottom, working up. And I'm going to really dive deep and pick his brain in there. I'm going to talk about some drills, some receiving drills for catchers that are really going to help you become a better catcher. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But before we get into it, you got to go check out at KGS Baseball on Instagram. That's Kyle's page. You can also check out kgsbaseball.com. A lot of great information over there. I'll leave all the information down in the description below. So let's get into it. In the previous videos, we talked about the setup, the one knee down, all that stuff. I really want to dive deep into receiving and the stance a little bit, the setup, and then kind of go into some drills that you do in pro ball to get better as a catcher.
Sounds good. All right, so, we talked about our setup already and kind of some variations there, some of the reasons behind why we do the different setups that we do and how we do that. And I think that is the foundation for how we receive as a modern catcher, as like a newer style catcher, where we're not necessarily on 2 feet. We're not necessarily just catching and sticking the ball. We're trying to optimize that zone more, get more calls for our staff, or at least be able to give that consistent movement and presentation to the umpire. You actually brought one of your tools out that you had.
Yeah, so
and I want to go ahead and use that.
This is actually something brand new that I got in. George Carl, shout out to George. He's actually the rover for the Toronto Blue Jays catching. And this is something that he uses. His friend Alan actually made this for him, and I got in touch with Alan. So I'm actually gonna start selling these on YouGoProBaseball, but I wanted to see what Kyle thinks about it beforehand. He hasn't seen this until earlier today, but I've seen a lot of guys using this catching wise to work on the receiving. So I wanted to pick your brain, see what you thought about this. Cool. If you like it, let me know. If you don't, let me know, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. All right, so like we talked about, whenever we get in our setup on a knee, we want to make sure that it's comfortable, it's balanced, we're still grounded, and we have that good setup through the ground. So for these drills that we're going to do, we're going to go through progression. Shout out to John Valley and Valley Gloves. Love using these things to get ready for machine work or live pins whenever I'm using my regular mitt. I've brought out the E27 27-inch miniature mitt today, and then also the weighted mitt that Valley puts out there. So we're going to use those in some prep exercises that I like to do with guys and that I've done, to be able to get ready to receive those balls off the machine or get into a bullpen or a game with those pitchers that are going to be throwing live. So I want to make sure real quick that whenever we are talking about setting up on a knee, that's what we're going to do here for these drills. I want you to understand that we need to try and stay anchored on the plate. So when I say anchored on the plate, that doesn't mean that we're way up on top of the plate here. We're not right over the plate. That just means that our body is staying pretty close to the center of the plate with where we set up. So compared to like a traditional setup, where if I'm setting up for that inside pitch, I may move way over here. If I'm setting up on a knee, I don't need to move as far, because I want to give that visual to the umpire of that ball being more on the plate than it is, whether it's inside this way to a righty, outside to a righty, or inside to a lefty this way. So making sure that we start anchored on the plate. First exercise that we're going to do now, after we establish that good setup, and I'm going to go right knee down here just because that's what I'm more comfortable with and that's what I like to use. I'm going to have John flip me some plyos at the bottom of the zone. I'm going to move this ramp back a little bit. I'm excited to use, and I'm going to just kind of show you guys what we're going to do first, and then we're going to talk about why we do that. Okay, ready? Okay, I'm gonna flip that back to you. I'm gonna move this back a hair. Go ahead. Okay, so what you saw there was just me working up this ramp through the ball from the bottom of the zone or below the zone. So we've talked about our setup. Whenever we start working into the glove actions and the glove movements and why we do them, you saw me there give my target, and then I went down almost to the ground, and then I worked uphill, up this ramp, into the ball, and through the ball into my presentation. So if you noticed my presentation, whenever I got to the ball, I didn't roll that ball this way. I made sure that I presented the ball pretty close to flat. Even though I'm using this small glove that doesn't have as much surface area, when we talk about a regular glove, there's more surface area on the top of the mitt for that umpire to see, and we can make sure that he sees all of that as we work into our presentation to the umpire. So adding that extra weight while we do that too, is just gonna help with our forearm strength, our wrist strength, our arm strength, and our hand speed through that ball.
So that's the regular weighted glove, right? Regular.
So this is the
27.
regular 27 inch. So this is a small glove. I like to start with this one just because it's a little bit smaller, and like we talked about, I want to focus on that pocket.
Now we also have a 27 weighted version, but now you have a bigger weighted version, right?
Yes, this is, I believe it's 32. Yes, 32 weighted. So this is a 32-inch weighted glove from Valley. Not all the way broken in yet, so it's still a little stiff, but it is heavy. And I like that because whenever we think of working below the ball, we want to try to accelerate from that position through the ball. That's how we're going to get those calls. That's how we're going to create that deception whenever we're trying to get those extra pitches at the bottom of the zone. So when we have that weight and we work below the ball, from there, if we accelerate and work to the ball, we're going to be training that movement as we work into real baseballs, especially right now while we're just using weighted plyos. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and use just a 1 pound wrist weight, just add a little bit more resistance and a little bit more weight as I'm working up. I've seen guys use 2, 3, 4 pound weight. We're gonna do the same thing here, just a few reps towards the bottom of the zone. Go ahead and use this ramp to our advantage while we have it here and work up from there. So I'm gonna show my target, down, and I'm gonna adjust up and just catch it, down, work through that ball, down, good. So a little bit off on some of the pitches up, which is okay because we are focusing on the bottom of the zone here. So we still need to be able to adjust with our glove back up to the pitches that are in the middle of the zone or the top of the zone, even if we are working from underneath.
So as a flipper, what is the flipper trying to do here? Trying to be firm and low in the zone?
I would say firm and then lower in the zone.
Okay.
Because we know, like our whole life, we're able to catch this pitch, no problem, right? But it's that pitch that's down low, if we're here, and then we have to adjust down and then pull that ball back up, it's gonna cause us some problems.
Let me ask you this, what about balls that are like outside or inside that you're trying to receive and make look like a strike? How does that work versus just the ball that's down the middle coming up to it?
Great question. So the way that I like to visualize it is we have our standard zone, right? So that's a rectangular zone. Think like the K zone that's on TV whenever you're watching big league games. For me, the edges of the zone that I'm trying to get, that I'm trying to add that value in, make a circle around that rectangle or a circle around that square. So for me, I like to think about that circle, and then there's a center point in the middle of that circle, and that forms like a cone out in front of play. That's just how I visualize it. But for me, I'm trying to work back along the edges of that cone back into the zone. But that doesn't mean that we're actually working back to the center on every pitch. It's just we're trying to create an angle on the edges of the zone, whether it be up, down, in, or out, to work back onto the plate with our glove action paired with our setup and try to get that extra call off the plate.
So if we're doing this drill here where I'm throwing the heavy balls to you, do you want the tosser to go outside and inside?
So you can do that. That's a variation that you can do. I like to go at the top as well because you've got to feel working through that ball down. I think that at the bottom of the zone is where we have our highest chance of being able to convert a pitch as far as frequency and how often that happens. Like you see those misses down at the bottom of the zone a lot. And so to start, I like to go middle, and then from there, we can start working in or out.
Let me ask you this, because and from my limited knowledge as a catcher, on the, let's say, inside pitch to a righty, as a catcher, I believe what I know is we were always trying to like turn it in like this. No more we're trying to do that, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So on the inner half of the zone at the bottom, if we try to do that, we're gonna get stapled. We're gonna get crushed because that's not a very strong position for us to be in to be able to receive that ball. So at the bottom, we wanna let that glove turn down as we work from the bottom of our pre-pitch. Okay, so our pre-pitch being that move, whether we just relax or whether we go all the way down to the ground. So we want that glove to go ahead and turn, and I like to think negative, like thumb and pocket negative towards the ground, to be able to work to that baseball. So at the bottom of the zone, even on that inside pitch, from here I can work to that ball from underneath, and then I can work through it and present. So if you want to go ahead and flip a few, like bottom on the lower half inside, we can do that. A little bit lower than that, right there.
Get you one more inside.
Yeah. So trying to work fast through that ball, especially when I've got a wrist weight on and a heavy mitt, but letting that go here. So I know, to your question though, whenever that ball does climb up in the zone, we're obviously not going to catch that pitch at the top of the zone or up above it here. So that's where that glove does start to turn over. I like to think still, whenever that ball's up at the top, working through it slightly or working through it slightly on the edge here, as opposed to catching it and then rolling it.
So are you negative on most of the pitches that are low in the zone? Like obviously you are going to be over here a little bit, right? And by negative, you just mean negative
Just
turn?
like a negative angle towards the ground. So if we think like we're flat here at 0 degrees, negative down towards the ground.
Gotcha.
And there's no set number either. It's not like, oh, you need to be 30 degrees down towards the ground. It's just letting that glove and that pocket work underneath the ball while we keep that pocket facing the ball.
And one thing I saw with the guys that use the ramp is I've seen, and this is not everybody, just some guys that I see, is they almost start in that negative position as they're coming up the ramp, which kind of makes sense. Now that you said, I've never heard that negative before. Again, I don't know. This is all new to me. Catchers didn't do this when I was playing, but it's really interesting stuff. Do you have other gloves that you use, other drills that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to work into some baseball work with my regular glove where we'll do some drills, but with the training mitts, while we add different constraints, like we have a wrist weight, we have bands or something else that's not letting us go into that position as easily. So when we take those off, it becomes easier. You know, different valley mitts, different other training mitts. I like to preset on the ground too. So like we can still use these same plyos, flip those back to you. And whatever setup I'm in, I like to go ahead and preset at the bottom. And then from there, work to that ball and work through that ball. So that way I'm starting in that position and then I have to go from there. That doesn't mean that I'm gonna start there every time, but that lets me get underneath the ball for sure, instead of being here, getting caught in between somewhere, and then having to jump to react to that ball. Now I'm underneath it, and I can work back up through it. So even though that pitch is like right at the bottom of the zone, I'm gonna try to work back through that into the zone, and just presetting that glove on the ground here with the 2-pound ball, working through that, and then controlling that presentation.
What about this glove? What the heck is going, you're missing a piece to this glove. What's the deal with this?
So this is a Half Web from Valley, and essentially what this does, I'm gonna take this wrist strap off. What this does is it makes you and forces you to catch the ball in that pocket. So we talk about a glove. If we have our regular glove over here and compare that, we've got the same pocket, but we're missing most of the web. So whenever we're looking at this, you have to catch it there or else you're probably gonna miss it. I like to use this glove, you know, with our regular baseball flips. I don't necessarily like to do this with plyos or heavy balls because whenever that ball hits, it has a tendency to roll out, and I still wanna feel that catch. So whenever I'm working, you know, just regular flips with a baseball, overhand with a baseball from a coach or somebody else that I'm working with, or out of a machine, I really like to use this Half Web. I think it's really good at making you focus on that pocket, which, like we've talked about, is the #1 thing still. We still want to catch that ball every time. We still want to catch it in the pocket. So if we can begin to pair what we do on the newer receiving front, the newer setup front, with what we've always known of, hey, we've got to catch that ball in the pocket, we got to make it pop and make it look good. I think that there's that good blend of those two, and we start to see those results.
Now, what do you say to the people who call this gimmicky? Like, why do you need so many gloves, different gloves? Why do you need a ramp? Which, by the way, again, this is your first time using it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna send you home with that so you can give me more in-depth feedback on it. But what do you have to say to the people who say, this is all gimmicks? Like, what's the deal with this? You're a current professional catcher. Why do you like using this stuff?
So first and foremost, I'll say, like, respect everybody's opinion. However, I feel like we can disagree, and I think that my answer to that would be, you know, think about like whenever StatCast and, you know, launch angles and everything else started to come into Major League Baseball. And everybody who gave that, you know, they didn't give it a second look. They said, hey, this is changing the game. It's not good for baseball. Now, if you look at the game, that is standard. Like you see Giancarlo Stanton hit a home run. It's like, oh, he hit that ball 120 at like 24 degrees and it was 470 feet. Like I think that it's something new, and I think that you don't necessarily have to adapt to it if it's not your thing, but if you're willing, then why not? So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna transition from our training mitts and the heavy plyos that we just used with the wrist weight, and we're gonna work just our regular glove now in more of like a preparatory setting for whenever we do get on that machine or we get into a game with our pitchers. So now I've got my regular mitt. John's gonna throw me just some regular baseballs now, and we're gonna go through just a couple feel exercises before we get going. So we're gonna do the same thing that we did with the heavy mitt. I'm gonna be in a little bit different position just because I like to change it up. And I'm gonna go glove on the ground again at my bottom, and I'm gonna work back up to that ball, still trying to focus on that pocket, working through that ball. The last one wasn't very clean. I'm gonna do one more. Just trying to work that ball back into the zone. From there, we're gonna mix up the setup again. I'm gonna go left knee down just because I wanna make sure I'm comfortable in all those different setups before I get working. And now what I'm gonna do is before he flips it, I'm gonna put my glove on the ground, and we're gonna focus on the inside pitch first. I'm gonna work that glove on the ground, through that ball, and back up into the zone. So I like to call this just a glove trace because we're tracing the ground with that glove to that position. So it mimics that feel of going from the bottom to that pitch and then through that pitch, but we're making it nice and smooth here. I think JT Real Muto got a lot of credit on Instagram because there was a video circulating around of him doing this drill off the machine, and he's super smooth with it. His glove works really, really well through the ball. I like doing this with guys. So we're just gonna
focus. Is the catcher timing off of the tosser, or is the tosser trying to time off the catcher?
I think generally the tosser, the thrower, whoever's feeding the machine, because you can do this on everything. It doesn't just have to be flips like we're doing here. I think that the person who's throwing the ball is going to go ahead and time that glove. So whenever that glove gets into that position, that's whenever you would throw the ball or feed the ball. So we're going to go. Good. And then we focus bottom, right there. Good. One more. Good. Now we're going to go outside. It's the same thing. I'm going to be here. I'm going to trace on the ground and create that angle early and then work back into the zone. So even if it is a little far, that's okay, because we want to push those limits and see what we feel like we can get and what we feel like we can't get. Because as an umpire, I wouldn't want to see you try to get this pitch out here if we like throw that ball and rip that pitch back onto the plate. I wouldn't want to see that. But that ball that's maybe ball or two balls are in the channel off the plate might be able to get that one. So just knowing those limits and knowing those thresholds.
I got a quick question for you. We used to do something in college. It was called the 6 spot. So you would set off maybe 2 balls off the plate. And if you set up there and you got that pitch and the catcher stuck it, a lot of times you would get that call. So is there any time when you're actually trying to stick a pitch, or are you always moving to the pitch now?
So that's a great question too. I think that you see so many of the big league guys and college guys and guys that are teaching this, working through the ball and focusing on those pitches on the edge. And like we said, that's just because those pitches in the zone we know we can catch. And so let's say we have a baseball coming in that's right in the middle of the zone. There's no need for me to get to that pitch and work it up. And so that's what you see with a lot of guys is like, oh, well, every single pitch I have to try and move. And I want to tell you guys, no, we don't. It's just those pitches that are on the edge that we think we can work back onto the plate and we can present with that flat glove and that good presentation and good show to the umpire we want to get. But the balls that are in the frame of the zone, we want to make sure that we just keep those strikes. We don't want to turn those into a ball by taking that pitch that's middle or middle up and pushing it out of the zone, or taking that pitch that's on the plate already and pushing it away from the zone, or working all the way back across the plate here. So those balls that are in the strike zone already, we know are pretty much always 100% going to be a strike. Get to those, stick them and present. But those ones on the edges are the ones that we want to try and manipulate and get called that otherwise wouldn't be called. And that's like the 50-50 like stry ball pitch. That's kind of like got either or of being a strike or a ball. If we can tip that in our favor of like maybe 70-30, 80-20 and like try to get that strike more often, we're going to be doing really well for ourselves and for our pitchers for that matter.
So is it safe to say as a catcher you want to anticipate the ball off the plate?
You want to anticipate the ball being in the edges of the zone, because we know that with our glove, we're good enough to be able to get back to that pitch and then do what we do best, catch the ball.
Very cool.
From there, I think that you can go ahead and roll into your machine work, your live arm work, whatever you have, whatever your capabilities are. I know like KGS for us stands for Keep the Game Simple. And that's something that we want to do as we dive into some things that might be kind of complicated otherwise. So keep it simple. We don't have to go machine work with all of these training mitts if you don't have them. It's awesome to have them. However, if you don't have them on hand, something as simple as just doing different timing feels with your glove and having somebody just throwing to you or flipping to you before you go to work will help make you better.
You talked about on the ride from the airport here that your whole thing is about providing value to your team, and this is one way that you could provide value to your team. Speak to a catching coach or maybe a head coach, speak to that high school catcher, like the mindset that you're trying to use to do that for your organization.
Gotcha. So the way that I look at it is, as a catcher, there's a few things that I want to accomplish. I want to make sure I keep everything in front. I want to make sure I throw out as many runners as I can, because that's going to add value to my team. So whenever we think about receiving, if I'm losing strikes or if I'm not converting the balls that I would otherwise be able to convert, why would I not want to do that for my team? Because that's going to get my guy off the mound sooner. That's going to create more outs for my team and less runs for my team in the long run. So for me, I'm looking at it like, if I can buy an extra strike and a 3-2 count in the bottom of the 9th inning to end a game and not let the 4-hole come up who has a chance to put a ball over the fence somewhere and tie it up or win it, I'm going to do that. And if this is my opportunity to do that, sure, just like we've talked about, if it's a tool that I can use to better my team and better myself behind the plate, I'm going to do it. Also, a little bit of backup for that. If we think about how many times you block a ball in a game or how many times you throw to second base, not even at a runner, how many times does that happen? Hopefully blocking, it's not every pitch, right? If we're blocking every pitch, that's going to make for a long night. if we're throwing every pitch, it's gonna make for a long night. Usually that doesn't happen though. We may throw at a runner 3 or 4 times in a game, and that's at the high end. So whenever we talk about receiving and trying to get those pitches, that happens almost every time that we're behind the dish. And so the high frequency of that happening is where that value comes from. If we can convert, or we can add, 4 or 5 extra strikes a game, and we're not losing any strikes that are in the zone already, why would you not want to do that? And that's just my thinking on it, and that's how I've looked at it as I've both coached this technique and also made the transition to this technique as a player.
That's a great way to look at it. I never thought about that, like the value proposition of receiving versus being a great blocker versus being a great thrower, having a good pop time or whatever. Because pop time is sexy. Like everyone wants to throw,
Absolutely, I was trying to get a 1.8 in high school.
Right, exactly. And
everybody wants that.
So to prioritize, and receiving is cool and fun, but I feel like guys don't work on it as much as like a pop time. We're trying to get their arms stronger, or being a better blocker.
Yeah.
So that's just, you put it so well, like to think about it that way, like you can really make a huge value to your team by working on these things and being really good at it. I was talking to you on the way here about, from a pitching perspective, I always liked a defensive catcher in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the beginning of the season, it seems like always the best hitting catcher starts the season, but by the end of the season, it's always the guy who is getting those strikes that's in there. At least from my perspective, playing for a while, it seems like that's how it always ended up every season. So if you can be a great defensive catcher, you're gonna provide a lot of value for your team, your organization.
And you'll find in high school, in college, in pro ball, you start to build those relationships with your pitchers too, to where they want you behind the dish. I think it was John Lester and David Ross, couldn't separate those guys, and it was, both of them ended up having a really good career. And whether it's in pro ball, whether it's in college, whether you're 12 and you're out there trying to build those relationships and work on your defensive tools, if a pitcher knows hey, I can hit this spot right out of the zone and you're gonna get that call for me, you're gonna punch a guy on during an at-bat, or you're gonna get me that 0-1 call to where now we're ahead, now we're 0-2, now we're 0-3 with a strikeout, then you start to build those relationships, and you have those guys that are in your corner to where you go, they want me to catch, they want me to be back there. I don't have to worry so much about doing this all the time, and I can be really good back behind the plate, whether it's with my glove, whether it's while I'm keeping the ball in front, or whether it's up here too, and running those guys out on the mound.
And think about it too, the better you are at this, the less base runners you're gonna have. So you're gonna have to throw out less guys. When you can give more value back here with the receiving, you're just gonna be a better, more valuable catcher to your team. So really good information. Shout out to George Caro, Alan, shout out. Guys, if you're a catcher, you wanna check it out. It's on YouGoProBaseball.com. Check it out. Sorry, I'm not gonna throw this because this is yours now.
No, we'll get to work with it. We'll get to use it and get some good feedback for you.
Give us some feedback.
I think I like it.
Cool, very cool. If you want to check out the Valley Gloves, YouGo Pro Baseball. Also check out KGSBaseball.com. Hope you guys like these drills. We're gonna shoot some more videos. Let's talk about blocking in the next video. So if you're interested in learning more about blocking, be sure to be subscribed to YouGo Pro Baseball with the bell on so you're notified when that video comes up. Thank you so much. That was great information. Hop down in the comment section below. Let us know if you got any questions. We'll talk to you in the next video.
Thank you.